Welcome to Journey of an Aesthete podcast, and I am your host, Mitch Hampton. And every guest we have is important, of course, but this is kind of a unique event for us because I don't believe we've ever and be in person, face to face like this in a stream. This is a first, right? I think.
It is, yeah, we've talked on the phone,
Right,
exchanged messages for
right,
years, and, we've seen each other in motion, but through
right,
each
right.
other's videos and, of course, through your live stream, so
Well, I should say a few words. I want this to be the start of what I'll call an occasional morning show. So I'm going to do
Oh, that
morning
sounds
things.
good.
I'm going to do morning things like once a month or something, or maybe once every 2 months. I'm not really a morning person, even after living here for for
Yeah.
4 years. I've been here. I've become more of a morning person, but I'm still more of an evening person. But it's all good. It's all hours of the day. But
Yeah, I'm definitely not a morning person, so thank you for doing this on morning on your time and not
yeah,
mine.
sure, I understand. But I sort of it's hard to know where to begin because you're so knowledgeable and accomplished in many more than one field. And
That's nuts because I don't think of myself that way at all. Honestly,
uh,
Mitch, I think of myself as just some random basic bitch from Chicago.
well, that gets to your YouTube channel. Isn't the name of your channel? What? Tell
So,
people.
I have to tell you, I posted one video,
Yes.
and then I got a huge pile of work dumped on
Mhm.
me from my job,
Right.
and that kind of I had actually shot the second video, and I'm in the process of editing the second video now, but, starting up a YouTube channel is really a lot more work than
Oh,
anybody thinks it is, and
oh,
I have developed a whole new respect for people who do this for a living.
yeah.
Um, Especially people who are doing everything on their own. There are a lot of
Right.
YouTubers who will farm out the editing work to somebody else. They'll find somebody on Fiverr or, Upwork or whatever and get some cheap,
Right.
editing labor.
Right.
I'm doing it all myself and I'm still kind of just learning the software. So my first video looks very rudimentary, which is fine with
I actually
me.
don't think it's rudimentary at all. It was very.
Yeah.
You had quick edits, and it was humorous. It was a good video. I know.
It was okay, it was too
Yeah.
long, I look at it with a lot of, criticism of, it's a first video, and I kind of think the first 30 videos is just practice. So,
Yeah.
the name of the channel is actually not Madam B, but it's Hey Bichette.
Hey,
It's, yeah, and a bichette in French is, it's like a term of endearment that girlfriends use with one another, it's like, "Hey,
right.
honey," but it's funny because, it sounds a little bit like, "Hey, bitch," like
Yeah. That's
but
the
it's
joke.
Amy Shed.
Hey, Misha, well, it's interesting because I've spent this year immersing myself in certain French films. So, do you know the films that Mia Hansen love?
No, I don't.
Well, she was the partner of Oliver Assayas, okay? But I think she's the better filmmaker. And she hasn't made that many features, but like she made the movie Eden.
Let's see.
Isabelle Hubert is often her actor she uses in almost every film.
Really?
Yes. Did you see this?
Okay.
She's a great filmmaker. Like her film, did you see the one where Isabelle Huppert plays a teacher trying to find herself after a divorce and finds these anarchists in the countryside? Really beautiful. And then she did a film called Goodbye First Love, which is extraordinary from the.
Yeah, weirdly, I haven't seen any of these. Unfortunately, yeah, work cuts into my movie and TV time way more than I wish it did, but yeah.
But that's sort of, I've been immersing myself in her films a lot for France. As you know, I love Rivette. He's my favorite, so I
Mhm.
always go back and watch Jacques Rivette and Eric Romer, who's I think underrated.
I do love Romer, yeah.
And I've been.
I Yeah, those are older films, and I do tend to go for the older films, but, there's certainly a whole lot of work out there that I haven't seen yet, so I look to you
Right.
for those recommendations because I'll be honest with you, Mitch, I married a French guy who's not into French movies. I get dragged to every superhero, every Marvel comics. I had to break it to him recently that I'm really tired of watching shows about dragons, and I just can't do it anymore, so
Right. Well, it's everybody. It's an interesting question because I have obviously biases and preferences. I'm a jazz musician. I prefer that style of music to other styles of music, right?
Mhm.
But yet I try to stay, I try to keep a foot and be knowledgeable about all music as much as I can. And, I even try to see many, I don't like many commercial movies, but so let me show you something interesting. So, have you seen White Noise yet? So
I have not. I have seen White Lotus. I've seen the first season of White Lotus, and I think it's a masterpiece.
it's very good. Mike
Yeah.
is interesting. We could talk about him, but this is see, look at this. This is Noah Baumbach's vision, this lobby cards.
Oh,
It's
no,
like
I
great
don't
bringing
know.
back the 80s rumba. And then like,
Okay.
so because White Noise is on Netflix, he's like giving little, if you go to see it in a theater, he's giving you little mementos, like little pluses, like free.
Oh, cool.
Isn't that great? He's doing that with Greta Gerwig and Adam Driver.
So it's set in the 80s.
Yes, well, it's based
Okay.
on the DeLillo novel, which I covered last month, so,
Yeah.
but I actually liked it a lot, but you really are taken with Mike White's writing and direction. He's very,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Longtime fan since Chuck and Buck, so I just think he's a brilliant satirist, one
yeah,
of the best of our generation.
yeah. Well, I saw
I
Chuck and Buck in the theaters when it came out in Boston. So do you
Yes,
want
so did
to,
I.
so here's some Paris stories for you. I saw Reservoir Dogs in Paris.
Did you really? So you
Because,
must have seen it in a theater where it had French subtitles.
yeah, I saw, and that was my first, of course, Tarantino picture, and I stumbled upon it. I was there, I think, for business. I think, if I remember correctly, with my dad, Aubrey Hampton, and we were talking to a soap manufacturer there. But I was so young. What was it, 91? Right, I was just it would have been 24. 20. That's
Wow, that
crazy,
must have
right?
been great to be here at that time.
Well, yeah, and that's it's weird. My memories of France at that time are almost like it's this morning, but I'm aware. This is before the train explosion and all that. Well, that's
Yeah,
confusing.
a
London,
really different time.
really different time. But so I have a couple of photos of me from that time, but also my dad married at the American Church in
I
1999.
remember you telling me that,
Yeah,
yeah.
have you been to the American Church?
I haven't.
I have a picture.
Should I?
Well,
I
I mean, I know that you. Well, this is a holiday show, right? This is like a
Right.
show, right? In a way.
I don't have anything against churches per se. I
Right,
view
right.
them more as, architectural and
Oh
artistic
yeah.
works rather than
So,
institutions.
well, of course, but as you know, I'm a pretty unorthodox believer. I mean, so
Right.
unorthodox, in fact, that I consider free thinkers like yourself to be on the same mission, actually, as
Yeah,
me
what
on
is
the same. Yeah.
maybe. I don't know if that's true. I think I'm probably a lot more cynical than you are in some
Okay.
ways. I think you're an optimist.
No,
More so
I'm actually a pessimist philosophically.
Well, more so that I think everything being relative, I'm probably more pessimistic than you are, because I
Right.
recall us having some discussions about,
Right.
the direction of, the American political landscape,
Oh,
and
that.
and
Wait. If that's your criteria, of course, that's pessimistic. Sure.
yeah, I
That's
mean,
just one.
I just
America is just one speck on.
right. I mean, I get called a doomsayer a lot, and
Right.
I'm fine with that. I'm fine with it. Somebody's got to be the
Right.
doomsayer. If it's got to be me, that's cool.
Well, I feel like that the spirit of the holiday is for everybody, quite literally. And so I feel like I'm here in this strange town in North Carolina, and surrounded by things I love. That's a side
Mhm.
Jacqueline Bisset from Rich and Famous, Fred Astaire. That's Mel Mayron from 30 something and big director now.
Oh,
Over there.
you're reminding me, you know what? You're making me think that I have a stack of pictures that are waiting to be framed and put up because as you can see my wall, I'm in the bedroom and the wall behind me is just completely bare
Oh,
because
wow.
I just have never had time to really deal with it.
Right.
Even though we've lived here for 5 years already in this apartment.
Right.
So yeah, thanks for the reminder that it's important to surround ourselves with the things that we love.
Yeah, that's a yeah, that's sort of part of that wasn't my motivation or intent in talking about. I was really more or less talking about universality, that the arts and that
Mhm.
consciousness encompasses so many different kinds of things. I mean, look, there's Um, I mean, I see both connections and differences among things. And so I do think, if you were going to ask me I could write an essay about this subject. So I really, really believe there's a word for you. Werner Erhardt's favorite word, belief, right? Some sarcasm there, since Werner Erhardt and S used to do diatribes against belief, which is this sort of it's a sort of Buddhist non-dualist that's in the forum or whatever it is. But to the degree to which I have a belief, I do think that Mel Mayron, when she directs Julia, have you watched that series about Julia Child?
I haven't. I've only seen Julia and Julia, the movie that came out a long time ago. And I have actually like piecemeal been watching this guy on YouTube who calls himself Anti-Chef. Okay. And he's been like gradually going through all of Julia Child's recipes and doing the learning how to cook while doing it through her recipes. And it's very, very entertaining and fun series that he's doing. But I haven't seen this series, the new series.
I do highly recommend it. Of course, I'm biased because
sure. Yeah, no, I would love to see that. I mean, I think we're living in an age where there's so much on offer nowadays.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? I feel that I almost feel there's a glut of offerings, and I start to feel overwhelmed. Like I can't keep up with it anymore.
Well, that's what I'm going to get to. So in the beginning of our stream, I said you have your preferences, and that's spiritually a thing where at the end of the day, if something comes out about Jacques Rivette or Jacques Demy, that's going to take my priority. I'm going to have to ignore all these other French things. That's a matter of having a style and having a project that's your life's project. That's a matter of preference. I think where a lot of folks go wrong is they do get distracted because they haven't done the detective work of finding out what their preferences are and letting your preferences lead you. And I think that if you do that, you won't be overwhelmed. I think your preferences will naturally, keep narrow your focus and kind of, I don't know, it's just a theory, but
I'm not sure anymore these days. I really feel that I'm very much in the camp that we don't make free decisions as much as we think we're making free decisions. I think we're very much controlled with, by neurology, by however our brains are wired and what we're drawn to there. And we're living in an age.
I get the sense that I'm on a Sam Harris podcast or who's it, Michael Shermer? Are those?
Well, I really do. I feel that it's important that we talk about that because the truth is that the Orwells and the McLuhans and they really kind of predicted where we were going to be at some point in the future when they were at the height of writing their research and their work. We're controlled by algorithms now. And I think that we think that we're making choices. And I find that I experience incredible feelings of being overwhelmed on a regular basis now, where, we're talking about all of these movies and things that I haven't seen yet. And last night, before my husband left to go to the south of France, he gave me the hard drive on which we keep all of our movies and, TV shows that we plan to watch at some point.
He's very organized.
Yeah, he's really organized. We're both pretty organized, but, he more so. And there's just this growing list. There were, he says, why don't we, pick a TV show that we can kind of watch in tandem. We can sync up each night and watch, while I'm down there and you're up here. And there had to be 200 TV series there that I was like, what? I don't even know where to begin to start choosing. And I kind of miss the days, to be honest with you.
The 3 networks.
When we had 3 networks, PBS and the UHF channel. I miss those days because
USA.
Yeah.
USA Cinemax.
And I think I wonder if this is why you and I feel I wonder if this is part of the nostalgia we feel for the 70s.
Sure. Oh yeah.
Where, I don't want to over glamorize what it was like to be, a kid growing up in the 70s, but there were some real benefits compared to today with the info glut.
Someone say 70?
Yeah, of course, Foxy Lady.
Do you know these people? Have you looked at this? Do you know?
Gosh, does he look familiar?
Really?
Yeah, who is that on the cover?
It's just a male model. It's not
Just a male model.
yeah,
Okay,
it's
so
not
that
like
was just the look of the day, and everybody was like, everybody looked like that. But yeah, I think
go
that
ahead.
this
I
is
didn't
what.
mean to interrupt you.
No, it's okay. It's like I'm just, thinking this is why I think we kind of gravitate back towards the
Right,
70s is the one decade that I'm always kind of reaching back to, because
right.
when you think of it, the 80s is when we started to get cable TV and
Yep.
satellite TV, and that's when we started with the sliding little box with the numbers, and then we had 50 channels, and then it's expanded, and you stay in hotels now and you get a TV with a remote control
Right.
and it's got 1,000 channels on. I mean, what are we supposed to do with that as human beings?
Right.
And like you say, it's the art of deciding what one's preferences are, how to kind of pare down your.
So I don't. So I'm not gonna. I don't want to delve into the free will debate here, although I could.
I'm not looking for a debate per se, but
Right.
just
Well,
putting
yeah,
it out,
no,
just putting it out there.
I meant the free will. The stuff that Sam Harris talks a lot about, and
Right, right. And yeah.
and Dan Dennett. But it's going to sound like maybe as a cop out, but I actually think that determinists, and I guess I'm an indeterminist, I suppose. I'm not at all determinist. So opposite sides of the aisle, hands across the aisle, can find, well, yeah, we're influenced, but don't you think that a lot of our preferences are really mysterious things that predate these recent technologies? Like, isn't it really a fact that, okay, so let me give you an example. I saw Godard's Weekend at the age of 8.
Mm-hmm.
8 years old, seeing Weekend on the big screen.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't my interest in Jacques Rivette connected to that experience? Isn't there like a lot?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, of course it
And at
is.
the end of the
Yes.
day, does that have really much to do with computers or algorithm? I mean, I get, you know what I'm saying? So,
No, but Mitch, you and I are of a generation that was pre-internet. And if we're talking about, and I think, a lot of what I'm talking about is not necessarily people of our generation, but the people coming up behind us who
right.
never experienced a pre-internet world. And I think, you bring up an interesting point, and I actually think that, yeah, kind of deciding what your preferences are should be a skill that we teach, to kids starting, in childhood, that you're going to be you're going to be inundated with so many choices, and how are you going to overcome the sense of overwhelm that you have when you're looking at 1,000 channels or 50 million different Instagram accounts or TikToks and all of this kind of thing? Every day it's kind of a battle deciding, what am I going to consume today?
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
I do. And I'm happy. One of the reasons, many reasons you're on this show. One of the reasons that we haven't talked about yet, at least not explicitly, is your knowledge of psychology. You are deep into psychology, and we'd be talking about, your analysis is, it may not be totally original with you, I understand, but to me, some of it is stuff I have not thought about before. Like, you know what I mean? Like, for example, when we're discussing the right wing and how pathological it is,
Yeah.
you say it's childhood trauma, Trumpism, right? That's your theory. Do you mind talking a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, my theory is not that it's only Trump supporters who have childhood trauma. I operate from a basis that absolutely every single person on this planet has some kind of attachment injury or a traumatic event from childhood. It can be something very minor or something major.
Yes.
And what happens as you get older is you're either going to develop good coping mechanisms or poor ones.
Uh-huh.
And I think that what we see, when you look at of course, I've been watching the J6 hearings, and when you look at those people who stormed the Capitol, what do you see there if not primal screaming?
Yes. Yeah.
It just, the whole event feels like one rage-filled, desperate, primal scream of a collective body of people who
Yeah.
were raised in environments that were inherently, probably multi-generationally
Yes. Yeah.
abusive or neglectful or traumatizing, and led to believe that this was normal. And as a result, it's a kind of like multi-generational gaslighting where the abuse is what to expect, and toughen up, and of course, even in conservative parental, theories, there's a lot of the cowboy up, toughen up,
Yeah.
take it like a man, don't cry, don't be like a girl, this kind of thing. This very, if you're a man being raised in this kind of environment where you're not allowed to express any other emotion other than anger and rage,
Yeah.
lest you be seen as a weak person or a weak man, of course you're going to turn out this way. What you see there is a pathology of antisocial personality disorder gone mainstream now, and they've all been given the green light by the ruling class
Yeah.
of their political ilk.
Right. Well, I think the other thing too that your comments remind me that there's just both sidism. And so the reason why there's a taboo on saying what you're saying, which to me are just facts, the facts of the case, is
Yeah.
this polite thing of like, well, both Republicans and Democrats are the same as two sides of the aisle. And you're like, wait a second, one side of the aisle is rooted in abuse and these pathologies. And
Yeah.
there's a kind of a taboo. Like, I'm glad on our show we're exposing that, but do you think there's kind of like a sort of a fake politeness or that kind of
I think it's not necessarily, to me, it doesn't feel like politeness so much. Here's how I see the Democrats these days,
yeah.
and the kind of more liberal, left-leaning media. The rules of the game have changed. They have been, the zombies are there at the gate. They're
Huh.
breaking in. They're in.
Okay.
And the people behind the gate, who are supposed to control that gate, they're in denial of what's happening and still trying to play by the same rules. So Democrats and people on the left seem to be continuing to play by rules of engagement
From
that
another
are forever over.
Yeah.
Like forbearance and civility and speaking in euphemisms. And this is not going to work with what America's facing down right now. The left-wing media continuously, you have to remember that as much as the Fox News, the Fox outrage machine, it's an industry.
Yeah.
And there's a counter industry, and that would be the kind of MSNBC, liberal media. I mean, some people would say that's the centrist media. I don't know what centrist means. I think that, everybody's making a lot of money off of this, and this is something that nobody really wants to talk about. And I think we're long overdue to start talking about these things in hard language instead of always trying to, use this soft euphemistic language.
Right.
So yeah, I
Well,
mean,
George Carlin, remember George Carlin's rants about the soft language, about he'd do that skit about shell shock?
yes. And I think Carlin is somebody that definitely, kind of formed my worldview and my personality, my perspectives. Carlin was a huge part of that.
Yeah.
I think he would change some of his views if he were still alive today.
Of course he would.
At the end of the day, he was a reasonable guy, very, very intelligent, very perceptive, astute. And, I look back on his kind of, the bit he used to do about how, you don't bother voting because your vote doesn't matter anyway. Both sides are the same.
That's what he would change.
He would change that in a heartbeat today if he could be here to see what's
that's
going
what I'm
on.
saying. That's what I'm calling both sidism. We're, again, I don't want to spend too long on politics because my show is
me either.
But it needs to be said that one side is illegitimate, corrupt, and insane, and the other side is kind of, with all of its flaws, an ordinary political party. That's just
one side has truly gone. One side has gone completely rogue. One side has decided that the best way for them to keep their ruling class in power is to appeal to their base's worst instincts, to give green lights for everyone to be your worst selves. I'm giving you permission
Right.
to be your worst self. And people love that because, you know, it is difficult to be a civil person on a daily basis. Believe me, I ride the metro every day. And boy, there are some days where I'm just like, I have to close my eyes, you know, hang on to my handbag so I don't get mugged while my eyes are closed, and just do the whole like George Costanza, you know, serenity now thing until I can get off at at my station and get out of there. So I think yeah, but I agree with you. We shouldn't spend too much time on politics because
I mean, we should also spend time on things that are important. I mean, of course, politics is important to you, but
sure,
I
sure.
did want to show you this picture of that's the American church, and that's my dad and his second wife there. Isn't that crazy?
Wow, yeah, nice.
And this would be 1999, again, another era, right? An analog era, I guess.
Have you ever had a chance to see the inner workings of a church organ?
No, that's a whole field of study I have not yet.
Well, if you ever get back to Paris, I can probably arrange something. It's pretty amazing when you go behind, because actually the pipes that you see at the front, that's just a facade. Those aren't even the real pipes. All of the piping is behind that wall. And it's pretty amazing. A good friend of ours is a church organist in the south of France. So she's given us tours behind the scenes, and it's pretty fascinating stuff. But I want to get back to you talking about your love of French films.
Yes.
You know, you talk about a lot of these films, like, you know, Jacques Rivette and you know, Eric Romer, you know, Godard. So you know, a funny thing, you know, I live here. I've lived here for 8 years now. And no, I have yet to meet a French person or have a French friend who's remotely interested in that genre, that epoch of films. Everybody is everybody here is much more interested in what the latest Omar Sy film is. And I love Omar Sy. I think he's a great actor.
Oh, yeah.
He's the most beloved actor in France.
Oh, yeah.
But, you know, some of the things he has put out are a bit, you know, they're very commercial. You know, when you look at what's popular, what's trending in France, it's never, ever the films that we wish they were. Right. I wish they would do a Claude Chabrol, kind of, you know, marathon.
Oh, yeah.
But that just doesn't happen. You actually have to kind of seek out those movies here if you want to watch them. In fact, Netflix just recently started kind of dropping, you know, a few films here and a few films there from that era. Yeah. And also, it's nice that they're there.
La Cérémonie, speaking of Chabrol,
yeah.
I mean, and also a long career, you know, and also.
Yeah. And I kind of took my YouTube channel name, the Hey Bichette thing, from one of his films, Les Biches. You know, Biche is like the more adult version of Bichette.
That's right.
So, so it's very strange, you know, it's we as Americans have a kind of love of this French literature and French film. And in fact, most French people that I know here in Paris, not really that interested. They actually are more interested in what America's importing over here, or the UK.
Oh, yeah. That's a grass is greener thing, though. That's like people kind of that's an example of attention being influenced by. So here's how I see it: there's difference and sameness, right?
Yeah.
So I really think that the French are seduced by the difference. In other words, I think
maybe.
So I don't think it's that the American products are that good, actually.
No, it's clearly not. And you know,
again, my apologies to those that loved Coda. Apologies to those that, you know, again, I'm not saying Coda's trash, but it certainly wasn't the best film of that year. But it never is that wins the Oscar. But my real point, I think, is that I think that in the arts there's reception theory, and we often receive things for many different reasons. And I think there's always been among the French a fascination with America. That's really true. That informs a lot of their decision making. and I would say to an irrational degree, where they neglect their own greatness. I'm going to go that far. That's one
I
of the
think
side effects of it. Yeah.
I think that's really true. I also think a big part of it is that French people of like yours and my generation live,
Yeah.
living here in France. I think they feel a real necessity to distance themselves almost from the France of their parents and their
Yes.
grandparents.
Absolutely.
And so, a lot of those old films that we love, to them, they
It's
just feel
boring.
like, ugh, it's just old-fashioned crap that my grandma
Yeah,
liked.
it's
I
like
I
you know,
can't
it's
tell you how many times I've heard that.
oh yeah, they probably to them it's crap. It's I'm sick of Michelle Piccoli.
Yeah, it's not
I'm
it's
sick of
not even,
whoever.
and even if they don't think that it's crap, it's just that, ugh, anything that my grandma was
Yeah,
into,
my parents.
I'm sure it was great, it was good for the time, but, we have better stuff now,
Yeah,
and also, people's tastes have just changed, and
yeah,
people are not, we're experiencing a crisis of a attention span disorder. I think people are very used to quick fast jump cuts now, and you can't hold people's attention anymore
yeah.
with the long takes and long pans and
Oh yeah.
long breaks of silence in the dialogue. People don't have the
They don't have
attention
to.
span for it anymore. It's getting, I don't know where we're going from there, but I wish that style of filmmaking would come back into vogue because I really love that.
Yeah.
I start to find
Well,
sometimes when I'm
that brings us to Ty West,
yes,
right?
yeah, and
Isn't Pearl a really good film? Isn't it?
it is. I will go
Really?
so far as to say I think Pearl is a masterpiece, and I think I know that word gets overused a lot, but
Yeah.
let's start with X, and we should probably preface by saying that
Oh,
there
yeah,
may be spoilers coming up.
yeah,
So I am a big fan of horror. I
yes,
do love horror cinema. And somebody recommended X to me. And like I said, I just have not had time for movies and TV, like I'd like to have. So I finally found the time to sit down and watch X.
yeah.
And, yes, it's got a lot of the, horror tropes that we're
That's great.
expecting. But by the end of X, I'm like, gosh, that movie was so much more
Yes.
than a horror movie.
Oh yeah.
It's almost reductive to just call it horror because it's much, much more than that. And somehow Mia Goth herself,
Mm.
I think, is going to be somebody to watch.
Oh yeah.
She is redefining what feminist cinema
Oh, that's
means.
interesting. That's really interesting.
So, and also, they're she and Ty West, they're kind of also um I think that they're addressing certain issues such as how the elderly are portrayed in film.
Oh, absolutely.
And I really loved
Oh,
that. I thought, because we're so used to, the movies of elderly people, they're all sweet and old and aging and living in a, the Notebook and these kinds of things.
yes.
And now we have this movie where the elderly people are the danger.
Right. Well, they're living.
And you rarely see that because we look at elderly people and we think of them as being, harmless.
Yeah.
They're old, they're harmless, they can't, move and walk and talk like they used to.
Yeah.
And that's not really that's not accurate. That's not necessarily always the case.
Well,
And I think it's
I can
fun.
say that I was really blown away by Pearl and just the
Yes, I
conversation.
was too. I
And
thought Pearl was
the way it imagines early 20th century and the mask
yeah,
pandemic and it's like you could see that he knows his Vincent Minnelli and Douglas Sirk.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, you can see what his influences are. That's one thing I really love about Ty West's work is that you can see what his influences are, and yet his work doesn't feel derivative.
right.
They all feel like an homage rather than, a carbon copy of something else.
Right.
In the same way that Tarantino, his films, they don't, what his influences are because we've seen all
Right.
the same films that he's seen,
That's
but
right.
you're like, wow, look what he's doing. Like he's taking a certain style and a certain trope
Yeah.
and completely making it his own. And I think Ty West is doing the same thing.
Very
He's
similar.
definitely one I'm going to be watching
Absolutely.
for the years to come, and hopefully we'll continue to put out work that's this good. But Mia Goth, I
Oh,
mean, she
yeah,
she has blown me away in those two movies.
just amazing.
Absolutely blown me away. And I've seen that, oh, she's the new it girl of horror, and I think no, she's just the new it woman,
Period.
period.
Yeah,
She's the it woman. She's not a girl. She's a very, very talented individual. Very gifted.
yeah. No,
You
it's an
know,
amazing performance.
her emotional range in Pearl,
Yeah,
her my gosh, every micro expression, every move of her body,
yeah.
the woman acts with her every fiber of her being,
Yeah, absolutely.
and she's absolutely phenomenal. And I think we need more stories like Pearl. We need more movies like Pearl. We need more Mia Goth and Ty West.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that we kind of connect over those films and her. It just really remarkable, really remarkable. I
Yeah,
know.
I'm glad that you liked that. I thought that you would find both of those films interesting. And there's going to be a third one coming out called Maxine.
Oh wow, interesting.
Yeah, that one is going to be about the main character, one of the characters in X.
That's right.
So that's going to be pretty interesting. And I have a feeling that one will be set in the 80s. If I have to guess,
Oh
that
yeah,
one's going to be set in the 80s. That'll be fun.
it will.
Yeah.
Speaking of stuff set in the '80s, have you watched any of these shows taking place in the '80s recently, or have you? What have you? I know you keep up with things, and you're kind of
I haven't lately, and that's why, you're a lot of the things you're talking about. Let me look at I'm going to have to look at my phone and see
right.
what has been recently viewed in my
I mean, you're
Netflix.
incredibly busy, but you actually watch more than I do, actually, which is
Do
amazing.
I? I'm
Yes.
not sure that I do
Yeah,
lately.
yeah, because you're always saying, have you seen this? No, have you seen it? You're the one that directed me to Ty West.
Right, right. But again, those two movies were movies that a friend had recommended to me and said, whatever you're doing, stop and just watch these two Ty West movies. You're gonna love them. As it turns out, things that I watch on Netflix are mostly true crime.
Same here. Same here.
Yeah, it
So
seems to be
did
mostly
you
true crime.
see?
Dahmer. You know,
Oh,
of course, Dahmer. How can we not talk about Dahmer?
well, I have a blog post coming out. Actually, in January, I discussed the one in a weeks ago. I talk about Ryan Murphy.
Oh, yeah.
So I praise Ryan Murphy as having a unique vision in
Yeah, I agree.
reimagining the biopic. Totally, totally different. Like
Yeah,
the script and impeachment and Gianni Versace and very.
I haven't seen the Clinton one yet, and I know that I need to, and that is on the list, on the growing list of stuff to keep track of. But yeah, as a general rule, anything that Ryan Murphy is attached to, I usually love.
Yeah,
Um,
very interesting.
there have been a couple of exceptions to that rule, but as a whole, his body of work is cohesive.
Well,
He's got
you mentioned Dahmer, and that's
his approach to Dahmer was no one's ever done that before.
never done it.
Many films.
Here's a $1 million question. In your opinion, is part of the uniqueness of it a function of the serialization aspect? What serialization does in terms of the sort of following psychology over time? It's an interesting. You think that's
Well,
right?
I'm not sure about that. I mean, I can say that I thought he was very true to the book that the series is based on, that he really tried to do his best to make sure the screen adaptation of that book was well represented. I think it has to do, I think the eeriness of the series has to do with two things: the pacing, the ambiance, and the phenomenal performance by Evan Peters.
Oh wow.
Yeah. He's another like young actor who just kind of blows me away in every performance. So, who would have ever thought that this kid years ago would turn out to be this absolutely phenomenal talent?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think those three
Oh yeah,
things.
those are important. But I do think that there's a genre, not a genre. There's a formal consideration. I don't think that I don't think Ryan Murphy could accomplish what he does in a standalone 90-minute picture.
No,
That's
not
what
at
I mean.
all. I don't think
That's
yeah, yeah, I see what you mean, like, doing it as a series instead of
right.
yes.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, because
Yeah.
that's you can only employ that kind of pacing if
Right.
you have enough a number of episodes in which to do it. And so I do love when kind of a big involved story like this is done as a
Mhm.
series
Yeah.
versus just one motion picture.
Yeah.
I actually thought oh gosh, I'm forgetting the name of it. What was the last thing that Scorsese did? The Irishman.
Yeah. The Irishman. Yeah.
That should have been a series.
Yeah.
I think Scorsese is to the point where he's kind of not moving along with the times.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure he probably insisted that, I want to make a 4-hour movie. And he doesn't understand the way that the psychology of humans consuming, televised
Oh, yeah.
and streaming content these days. And had he broken that up into 6 episodes,
Yeah.
I think he would have had better reviews. I think people would have been more receptive to it. I've got a whole bunch of friends who are like, I can't watch a 4-hour movie. I'm like, it's actually pretty good. I'm like, nah, can't do it. So yeah, I think he missed an opportunity there. And I think that this is a part of like filmmakers' arrogance that he doesn't want to do anything in this, format that he
Yeah.
considers to be beneath filmmaking.
Yeah. He's wrong though.
He is wrong.
He's wrong on a couple of. I mean, well, first of all, is Melanie Mayron told me herself it's the same viewfinder.
Exactly.
You're looking through the same as a director, so to her it's all the same. And I
Yeah,
think that's
exactly.
all the
But
same.
it's when you break things up into kind of more bite-sized pieces for your audience, it's a lot easier to consume.
Yeah.
It's very basic, basic psychology. There we go again. But my training is in psychology, so it's hard for me to not to see everything through that lens.
Sure. Well, do you mind then? You said you want to talk about Elon Musk, and I should.
I feel that we have to talk about him. I feel like we can't not talk about him.
No, but here's the thing. I should be. This is a full disclosure. I never loved Elon Musk.
Full disclosure, I did.
Ah,
I
so
was
this is very interesting. See, I think it's because I'm autistic. I think I don't. I'm not saying I don't have loves and hates, but my loves and hates are very rare. And so when somebody's a public figure, when I analyze that, and I analyze every public figure, I try to do in this comprehensive intellectual way.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I try to say they get this right, but I was always on to his flaws.
Interesting.
I was always on to his flaws because I never worshipped him, because I don't have that thing in the brain. I think this is an autism thing where I just naturally worship what's popular or see that.
So
yeah.
I have no shame in admitting that I think that maybe some of it too is that you're a heterosexual male, processing a man who's a public figure.
I don't know.
And I have no problem admitting that I was an Elon fangirl. I thought he was adorable. I thought he was just the most lovable dork. He seemed to be so full of goodwill. Every interview you saw him in, every interview you read about him, and of course, there were probably red flags all over the place that I missed, and that would be in keeping with parts of my private life.
Well, isn't that just a natural sexual thing of life? Like, it's human. Like, for example, if there, as you know, so being, I guess, straight, I guess if Cheryl Teagues, or if Megan Fox, or Raquel Welch, or sex symbols past, present, I guess you would say I could possibly give them a free pass, or not be sensitive, right? Not be willing to if they indeed are not exemplary figures, right, in their personal life. Is it a similar? I mean, I don't know. Is it a sort of I don't know the parallel that hello?
I'm back. Are you
Oh,
there? Yeah, you
yeah.
froze up for a minute. So I heard Megan Fox was the last thing I heard.
Oh, those are just examples. So, could we have a blind spot if somebody is really a hot public figure, an extraordinarily attractive public figure, that we're
Yeah,
going to
and
not see?
I mean, I know, I've seen all of the memes of, poking, kind of ad hominem attacks on Elon Musk's physicality nowadays, but keep in
Yeah.
mind he has been on the scene for decades.
Okay.
He's not new, and yes, he did have, he has had some hair replacement kind of, procedures and whatever.
Right.
None of that matters to me, but there was a time where he seemed so full of goodwill more than anything. And that just, whether you thought he was attractive objectively, that made him more attractive.
Absolutely.
So, yes, once you become a fan of somebody, you
Yeah.
start ignoring anything that doesn't, you're looking for confirmation bias. You're not looking for red flags or anything that's going to
Yeah.
contradict what you want to think of that person. So I was an Elon fangirl,
Okay.
up until, yeah, a good few, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And it was his behavior on Twitter that started to turn me
Right.
off.
Right.
When I started to see patterns of behavior that for me matched a pattern of behavior that felt like a 13-year-old little incel on 4chan. I just did not understand
Yeah.
why a grown man is behaving this way, and why a grown man who's supposed to be changing the world, he's brought us electric cars, and he's going to take us to Mars and all of this stuff. Not that I ever believed the Mars thing, but I thought it was great. The electric car situation I thought was great because, I am definitely, climate change is definitely like my number one existential fear
Oh,
as a
yeah.
human being. So,
I
seeing,
don't want to be misunderstood. So when I say that I don't worship or am not a fan of Elon Musk, and I analyze him in my own, as a way I talk about, actually, it's the way I approach my show, my podcast. I always look at the things that are good in a person. I try to be and as I'm very aware of the, innovation, but I start with
right.
I start with a set of assumptions that guide life. I just assume that anybody that does something good, or two things good, or three things good,
Mm-hmm.
I always assume that there's a possibility that they're not all good in all aspects of life. And that assumption guides the way I think, the way I take in information. Now, I'm not saying that that's how one should live. I just can't help it. It's the way my mind works. So that sort of, it's kind of, there's a detachment there, I
It
think.
makes sense, yeah, and of course, I am an emotional person, so I'm not I'm very neurotypical, put it that way,
Right.
and so yeah, I was definitely into the fact that he was an innovator, and I bought into the myth. And this is something we have to talk about with this guy, because what's coming to the surface now, what journalists are starting to bring, that the scum is rising to the surface. He
Yeah.
lied about his credentials. He lied about his education. He lied about his college degrees.
Uh-huh.
It turns out that it's very possible that his greatest gift actually is just like Elizabeth Holmes, Sam Bankman-Fried, Donald Trump. His greatest gift is the gift of the gab.
Yes,
And
it's correct, is what I.
yeah, I mean, I'm
Yeah.
not sure that I don't know if I don't know if I would call him a grifter per se, but he is a very interesting person in the sense that, and he's very open. He's talked about these things openly, and part of why I think a lot of people like me came to be fangirls and fanboys of him is that in interviews he would talk very openly and sincerely about his Asperger's, his bipolar,
Right.
his how he was bullied at school,
Oh,
how
yeah.
he has struggled with feelings of being not one of the cool kids. And I
Right.
feel like what we're witnessing is a guy who's in his 50s now, who's still trying to be part of the bully club. He's so
Oh,
desperate to be he wants to be accepted by the jocks. It almost feels sometimes watching him like he's trying to pass a freshman year hazing.
I see.
And I just, I was talking to a girlfriend last night, and I said, I don't understand. What are we witnessing here with Elon Musk, with this behavior? Like, why did we not see this
Hmm.
years and years ago?
Hmm.
And she said to me, Deb, the love bombing phase is over.
Oh,
And
like
I
a
thought,
cult.
whoa, yeah, actually, that makes a lot of sense because
So what? Yeah.
even on a mass scale, charismatics, and it's hard to call Elon Musk a charismatic, might sound weird calling him a charismatic because
Yeah.
he clearly, kind of a dorky guy, kind of a nerdy guy. He doesn't have a lot of flair. But that was part of his charm. That's what made him endearing, was that he was, very nerdy and awkward, and which he attributed to having Asperger's.
Right.
Um, the thing is, all of these people, I think all he's ever, what I get the sense that what he wants more than anything in the world is for people to love him.
Right. Right.
And if he's not getting it, and if he's not getting it in ample quantities from the political left, he's going to go find it on the political right. And it's much easier, it seems, to get it from the political right because the political left is much more diverse, much more
Yeah.
discriminating, much more critical of one another, even like, intertribal kind of
I mean,
conflicts.
I have one thing to say about autism because I am autistic, and so one vice that we have, if we could talk about a vice autistic, it's also a virtue, is that when we're really interested in something, we become an expert on the thing we're interested in, which I think has a lot to do with his accomplishments. But here's the shadow of that. So I don't know much about Elon Musk, but let's say he's an apolitical person by nature, not an activist. Maybe, you know what I'm saying? Maybe that's not his focus. He's vulnerable to being used
Yes.
by the right wing. And so autistic people, we have to be very conscientious that when something is not our expertise, that's why I try to spend time on things over which I'm not an expert. So I can be so I can dip my toe and say, well, this is what's going on. Even things I don't love is a way of not just being well-rounded, to be on guard of being manipulated by other people. And unfortunately, it's I can see very much as a certain kind of personality type. It's like an experimenter or a scientist. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I can see them getting the ear of the Republicans and not thinking twice. Unless, hold on, one more thought. Unless that autistic person is a politico and is therefore committed. See what I mean? So
yes, and you're on to something, because there are actually, some theories trending online that what we're witnessing possibly is the radicalization of Elon Musk by the right. There are a lot of theories floating around as to why he's behaving like this, why he's gradually gotten worse and worse over the years. It's clear that he's addicted to Twitter. It's clear that he's addicted to the attention that he gets when he tweets. Yeah. He has a lot of traits in common with Donald Trump in this sense. But that's the thing, there are a lot of questions floating around. Like, even I have a lot of questions, like, did he always hold these repugnant views and was just hiding it? Are we seeing the mask drop off of a psychopath, or are we seeing a person who is neuroatypical and who has bipolar getting co-opted and utilized as a weapon by the far right? Because he has clearly swung completely far right now. The tweet about Fauci was the end of it for me. I blocked him. I just thought, and I have not deleted my Twitter account yet. And there's a part of me that's hoping somebody will get in there and go, we can't have this anymore. We cannot have this anymore. I do think Twitter has value to the global community. Without Twitter, people who are living in, oppressed countries under authoritarian and autocratic rule cannot get messages out to the rest of the world about the realities happening in their countries. We need this platform to stay alive. Mm-hmm. For all of its faults, no Twitter, no Arab Spring.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right. And so we need that. And, the issue of content moderation is always going to be an ongoing challenge, because to some degree, I hear a lot of people complaining, and I've heard over the years people complaining about the problems of content moderation on social media. And I have a very simple answer to that. Block. Delete and block. I do not
Right.
understand. Like, I know it's tough to do that because it means that you're going to block 500 people a day. So block 500 people a day.
Right. Well, it's content. I mean, we've discussed this before. The 18th century, which is my favorite century, actually,
That's interesting.
or
Okay.
just like the 19th century, especially
Okay. I didn't understand. I never knew that about you.
especially the Victorian period. Yeah, but if we're talking
Okay.
about, I'm reading a book now in the 1760s. It's very interesting. Because
Cool.
that's when, the reason why I like it is when the Enlightenment is at war with the Romantics. That's the period when they're sort of debating with each other. But that in itself, that friction it's what's so exciting. You get the early novel. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but
No. I mean, it is interesting. Even if if you study the French Revolution at all,
right.
you'll, especially post-revolution France
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
a very, very, I wouldn't want to been around here for that. The revolutionaries reached a point where, if you were caught eating a croissant, you're going to the gallows for
Oh, yeah.
that. Use the vous form, you're going to the gallows. That's the thing about every revolutionary movement. There's always that group of people, that kind of take it a little too far,
Absolutely.
just a
Now,
tad too far.
why did I mention the 18th century? What were we doing? My brain, there was a reason.
Talking about Elon Musk and
There's a reason. Enlightenment, Romanticism, something. There was something. Oh, I lost my train. There was I don't know.
Well, we'll get back to it.
Oh, no. I think I know. And that so charismatic figures. So I think
charismatic figures, yeah.
And Twitter and these things. I think that these platforms, I think they are tools, and we can use them. Respond. I know it sounds corny.
Yeah, absolutely.
Responsibly, but I also think too that see, again, back to I'm talking about all these Hancock and Mel Marin. What do they all have in common? They're all arts. What are the arts? I think all the arts, whether it's sculpture, stand-up comedy, whether it's George Carlin, Margaret Cho, they're actually all part of the human project. Not only creating something new, but actually self-understanding and the expression outwardly of that self-understanding. I happen to think that's beautiful.
Yeah, it is.
That's kind of how I would describe it. So it's
I totally agree with you there. Yeah. And I think that holds true today. Any artists, comedians, they're the zeitgeist.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, going to get back, just a little bit to the content moderation issue, because now
that's what I was gonna. I'm sorry. So content moderation in the 18th century, that was the century in which free speech was invented. It's when the First Amendment. So it's interesting that the concept of our modern notion of free speech has a history. It comes out of a particular century, the 18th century comes in a particular, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually a problem because it's the free speech absolutists will hate what I'm going to say, but hear me out. That's actually what's wrong. So that's why we really need a rethinking of free speech, because a lot of the baggage of the free speech is in a world of muskrats, and pens and quills, not a world of Twitter and bombs and terrorism.
Exactly.
Let me be even more blunt. Of course, we need content moderation. So, in other words, if you have a politically corrupt party that's illegitimate as a political party, and I'm going to go that far. I don't think Republicans now are sort of it's rogue is too kind a word. It's like almost a fascistic party.
Oh, well, not almost. It is.
It is a fascist party. Well, in historical conditions like that, ought you to ban? In other words, why not ban? Advertisements and bans. You see what I'm saying? That's just.
I am not saying that we shouldn't have content moderation. Don't get me wrong. I am not a free speech absolutist, and in fact. The First Amendment, the free speech is a poor moniker for the concept, because that's not actually the concept.
That's right.
The concept is actually meant to be moderated speech. and that there are certain types of speech that the
Yeah.
government must not be allowed to shut down. And of
Sure.
course, the First Amendment is about the government, what the
Right.
government's power is. Twitter,
Right.
Facebook, all social media platforms, these are not government owned and operated platforms.
Mhm.
So I do agree that there should be content moderation.
Yeah.
I worry very much about the radicalization. 'Cause clearly, social media is used to radicalize
Young people.
mostly
Yeah.
mostly young men
Young man. Yeah.
and boys, not just men, but literally boys,
Mhm.
to take up arms against a government or an institution
Oh,
or a race of people or an ethnicity or a religion,
yeah.
whatever the case may be. So, yeah, social media companies have a responsibility to moderate, but at some point it is a game of whack-a-mole, is what I'm saying.
Oh,
So yes, they have a responsibility, and they should uh, definitely ban the most odious of accounts,
sure.
but there has to be some personal responsibility if you're going to use social media as well. And it's we have to rely on the company itself to play whack-a-mole, but we also have to whack some moles. I
Yeah.
go back to the zombie apocalypse analogy often,
Same.
because it has to be a collective effort.
Yeah.
Like, yes, we might have, like, a cannon that we can fire off into a herd of zombies, and that'll get rid of a whole bunch of them. But there's always going to be strays, and that's going to be up to us to kind of, bow and arrow or machete or whatever we need to, get those people. I'm not condoning violence. This is just an analogy.
Right.
I'm using a zombie analogy here, but
Right.
but what concerns me is that we have a lot of people who use social media who don't feel that they should have any responsibility whatsoever
Mhm.
in doing their part as well, to just block and delete, mute, block, delete. Do what you have to do, because there's no social media company, no centralized social media company can protect you 100% from
No.
content you don't want to see and hear.
Or it's offensive, or it's
Yeah, there's no company that can
Yeah.
possibly do it. There are how many billions of users on
Right.
Facebook and Twitter? It's impossible. People talk about Twitter as the town square. It is not a town square. There is no town square anywhere on the planet that has billions of people in it. It is a megaphone for anybody who wants to use it.
Sure.
And so, yeah, we do need content moderation, but everybody's got to take up arms against this.
Sure.
And I
Well,
hope that
that's
people who are staying
right.
on Twitter will kind of understand this and not expect that the world is going to protect every little sensibility that you have.
Yeah, that's well, that's our Gen X. You and I have this Gen X kind of what is it? Savvy or toughness? Maybe I don't know what the word is. Or I guess as people talk a lot
I
about.
mean, Mitch, Gen X, we grew up playing on those carousels that, kids would just spin them around so fast that you get knocked right off of them.
Oh yeah.
We got cut up and scraped and bruised, and, those were literally our battle scars. So, yeah, maybe to some extent we have a thicker skin. We grew up in a time where you could get bullied at school, punched out, get into fights, and parents weren't suing each other over it. And I'm not saying that it was okay. I'm not saying it was okay, anything that we,
It just informs our.
but it definitely shaped our personalities. So, definitely as a kid who, I grew up, a kid, a latchkey kid in Chicago. I definitely have a bit of fight in me. I definitely have a bit of, I'm definitely a brawler. So I'm not afraid to come to the fight. I'm not afraid to take on whoever's in front of me.
Oh yeah, that's one of the things I admire about you tremendously. I did, I forgot I was going to cue up the Bob Newhart show theme and have where he's going down the train, about Bob Newhart.
The guy who got me interested in going down into the field of psychology in the first place.
Bob Newhart, really?
Yeah, the Bob Newhart
Can we
show.
talk about that? Because I'm
Yeah,
a
when
Doctor Who
it
fan.
was my favorite show as a kid, and I remember thinking, what does he do? He just kind of talks to, nutty people all day long. That seems like that could be a fun job, Like in the end, I ended up studying psychology because I think I kind of wanted to know why, what the fuck is wrong with me? I think a lot of people enter the field of psychology with a want of understanding themselves better, their situations, or why their lives keep turning out a certain way. So for me, it was much more of a kind of like self-seeking, self-exploration project. And then I just became more interested in it as a discipline and a field in general. So, and I think my work with my previous work as a younger person with at-risk youths really informs how I perceive what's happening now with the rise of Trump and his supporters and it's incel nation now. And the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers and all of these people, these are all men who just never emotionally developed ever in their whole lives. And all they know is rage and anger. Rage, anger, entitlement. That's all they know. And while I'm on this train of thought, I'm going to say something really controversial.
Oh, but before you do, I'm going to show you. Do you mind an interruption?
No, go ahead.
Have you seen this?
No, I haven't.
You know who this is, though?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. No,
And
I
then-
haven't seen that book. Wow, what a great picture.
This is what she was doing before Dirty Dancing. This is 70
incredible
novel.
She wrote that. Wow.
Yes.
Good. I've never seen that book.
Yes, yeah, it's because it's early on. I thought I just throw that in there.
Okay.
Mitch Hampton. So anyhow, go ahead. You can say something.
Yeah, I am going to say something controversial. A lot of people are going to. This is a very unpopular opinion.
Okay. Brace.
I can't remember exactly who I was watching recently. It was somebody in a live stream, a book author, an expert on online radicalization.
Okay.
And she said, we can't dismiss anybody as being irredeemable. We have to believe that everybody is redeemable. I 100% disagree with that. And I think that's part of the wrong thinking on the left. I think that we keep wanting to believe that people can change and be better and find their better angels. That clearly, year after year since the rise of, since Trump ascended, has proven that theory wrong. Now, we could say maybe in theory, everybody is redeemable. But when you have to think about what would it take to redeem this person, do you know what I mean?
It's like, well, actually, I sort of agree with you because, as you know, for me, there are different realms of life. So I think what you mean by irredeemable is like basically existential risk and time, right?
Yes.
So I think what people are doing is they're confusing two aspects of life. They're confusing the therapy room with actual work in society. Those are two separate things. And I think that's what this author you're talking about is doing. They don't understand, like, it's basically the issue is trying to prevent a crime or trying to prevent grievous harm. That should be in that moment your emphasis or your and so that's
and I think that her argument was that her argument was that we should be talking to the sorts of people who did J6. We should be talking to the Roger Stones. We should be talking to, the worst of the worst who are now, getting handed prison sentences. We should be talking to them and trying to figure out where they're coming from and seeing how we can reach them. Like, we have to accept that there is a good portion of people at this point who are no longer reachable, not reasonably reachable. Like, I think if you could take the worst,
like the 1860s,
if you could take the worst person that went into that, into the Capitol on January 6th, if you could find the worst person in there and remove them completely from everybody they know, from their TV, from their podcast, from everybody they know, and put them into an environment where all they can do all day long is watercolors, plein air paintings, and listening to, harp music. It's possible that person could change after a number of years. Give them the only TV show they're allowed to watch is RuPaul's Drag Race. Yes, it is possible that you could change that person, but it would take years. And that's my point.
Yeah, that's a time thing.
Yeah, once somebody.
That's why I said there's the existential risk is time sensitive. It's sort of like how are we
exactly. And once somebody embraces evil, we're not just talking about people who have gone, off on off on the wrong path. They're not off on the wrong path. They're embracing evil. Mm-hmm. And I think we have to accept as a society that we have a large number of Americans, and not just Americans, frankly, this is kind of a global trend of people who have decided that they are okay with embracing evil as long as the evil that they embrace punishes the people they don't like. That's it. And in America, the people that they really hate the most are liberals. That's it.
Right.
It's not.
Well, does that mean that they hate us? I guess they do, right?
Well, I don't know where I fit. I don't think of the. I think it's wrong to look at politics on a spectrum. I think the left and right binary spectrum is wrong. I think we should look at it in Venn diagrams.
Okay. That was sort of half of a joke. I was half joking.
Yeah, no, I get that it was half of a joke, but that was something I wanted to express, that I really think that we look at politics, in this kind of binary left-right, and, where do you fit on that continuum? And it is wrong to look at it as a continuum. We should be looking at it as a Venn diagram. That we have different values and different, priorities and different perspectives and different worldviews, and they're going to overlap, here, there, and everywhere. And so I have nowhere that I fit. I literally don't feel represented by either side fully. Definitely not on the right. I don't feel at all represented by that end. Even though I ally with the left, I am not sure that I am a lefty. Put it that way. I don't know that I would describe myself as a lefty or a liberal or progressive, even though if you look at my views, somebody else might go, oh, well, she's clearly progressive. I don't know that I'd call myself that.
Right. Well, I think you and I are probably similar politically, but again, as you know, I put politics towards the bottom of the list.
Yeah, and I don't think we should be even looking at things in terms of politics anymore. I really do think that we need to start looking at things through the lens of psychopathology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We are way past politics. Politics is over. It's this psychopathology versus this psychopathology from now on. It's really, I think we're really in an existential battle between good and evil.
Yeah, that's true.
And this is something I might have in common, with people who are religious, who are believers. Yeah. I do have friends who are Christian. I have friends who are Muslim, and I have Jewish friends. I have friends of many different faiths. Yep. And I think the thing that we all kind of agree on right now is that this is a good versus evil thing, as close as it's ever been in our lifetime.
So in that sense, I guess we're living in a time like the 30s, right? Pearl Harbor. It's almost that. It's that kind of right.
I think so. It feels very it feels very late Weimar Berlin right now. It feels very late Weimar Republic. Right on the cusp of something horrible about to happen. Yeah. And since I have a platform right now, I'm going to come out and say it. I am very, very, very disappointed with Merrick Garland. I think he was a bad hire. I don't have any faith right now in the United States Department of Justice, and it's great that he has appointed Jack Smith. But at the end of the day, he's passing on his duties to somebody else. And we have seen this over and over and over during the Trump era, that Mr. Trump continues to commit crimes openly that we all witness every day. Mm-hmm. And absolutely nobody is willing to take him on. And something we keep hearing from the Justice Department over and over is, oh, we don't want to appear political. Well, I have a message for Merrick Garland, being more concerned with appearing political than you are with protecting the United States Constitution and democracy in America. That's a form of vanity.
Sure, absolutely.
And I think we also saw this with James Comey, another DOJ employee who I think really screwed us.
Yeah.
So, I don't think these are bad men. I think that, these are primarily good people, who definitely, are slaves to their own, need to protect their image over protecting the
The
rule of law. Yeah.
Republic or I mean, this is a much, you're I'm happy that you have a platform here and that you came on the show to talk about all this. Is there a anything you want to say before I play you the song? For every guest I play, I capture them in music.
Well,
I end the show that way, but before that, is there
before
anything?
you end the show, would you like to see the artifacts that I've brought?
Yes.
Because I know you ask your guests to
To
bring you
bring
some
artifacts.
artifacts. Now, like I said, because I live in a very small French apartment, I used to be a collector of many, many, many things, record albums, all kinds of vintage memorabilia. I was only able to carry with me, so much when I moved across the pond 15 years ago, and I very seldom accumulate, new things. So
Well,
I'm gonna start.
all
So
welcome here.
I'm trying to decide what order I should show you these things in. Okay, I'm gonna start with just, since we're talking about previous centuries, I have an old medicine bottle.
What?
Ictiol. And apparently this is something that you would put on, it's still sold today. It's something that you would put on your skin if it's, inflamed, or if you have a rash or something. I'm not exactly sure, but I actually I actually got this from my husband. He acquired this for me at some antique shop or other. It's so old that the cork is petrified inside the bottle. I'm trying to, how do I get that to the, yeah, the cork is so old, it's literally petrified inside the bottle there. So I've never even been